Hi, welcome to the Metaphysical Fat Podcast. I'm Sam and this is Kirsten, and we have an extra special episode for you today. We're
Yeah.
actually going to we're actually going to be discussing a bit of a passion project of Kirsten's. That's something that's quite close to her heart. So I'm being the backseat passenger today. I'm here for energetic and emotional support and the rest of it. But yeah, without further ado, Kirsten, would you like to introduce what we're going to talk about today?
Yes. We're going to talk about Paul McCartney today, the real Paul McCartney. And first of all, I just want to say all of this is conjecture and it's only for entertainment. We don't know these people. We don't have any idea what really happened here, but what we're going to talk about today is something that's very close to my heart because when I was a child, my parents had this big console stereo and it had a turntable inside of it. And I used to lie on the floor by the hour and listen to the Beatles. And I often had the sensation that Paul McCartney was sitting cross-legged next to me and smiling at me. And I know that's probably not very unusual. I'm sure that a lot of girls and boys too, with various rock stars feel like they have a personal connection to them. And that's one of the things I want to talk about today too, just because I feel like we place far too much emphasis on celebrity. And we often feel like we actually know these people when in actuality, we don't know these people. So that's why I don't like to really talk about celebrity too much. But I actually felt really called to talk about this. And I really felt like even Paul McCartney wanted me to talk about this, which I know sounds crazy, but I really feel it. You know, being a psychic medium, I can feel these things. And I think I always felt that with him. So Paul McCartney has literally been grooming me to spill his beans since I was 10 years old. So I'm going to take you back to when I was 10 years old. And I loved the Beatles. And when I was 10 years old and I loved something, I researched it, just everything I could find. So I read books, which was basically all that was open to me at the time. I read a lot of books about the Beatles. I read magazines. I looked at all of these things. And of course, this was, the 1970s. So the Beatles had already broken up by this time. But I studied them. And I ran across my very first conspiracy theory when I was studying the Beatles. And the theory was that Paul McCartney was dead. And there were a series of clues in the albums and in other places, which we won't talk about because back then it was just clues in the albums. And I looked at all the clues in the albums, and I'm going to bring up one now that is one of the most famous ones. And I'm not going to go through all the clues in the albums, but when I was 10 years old, this really fascinated me. And so I looked at all of these clues and I found them all and identified them all. So I'm going to put Abbey Road up here, the cover to Abbey Road. And this is one of the most famous ones. So as you can see, we've got the Beatles walking across the crosswalk. And first of all, we have John Lennon, and he's dressed in white. And he, according to the people who talked about the clues, this is a clue because he's supposed to be the preacher or, the person who's going to read the last rites. And then we've got Ringo Starr dressed in black, and he's meant to be the Undertaker, they say. Then we've got Paul McCartney, and he's barefoot, which I guess a lot of corpses are buried barefoot in different places. He's also holding his cigarette in his right hand, and he is known to be left-handed. So that was considered to be another clue. And then the last one, George Harrison, he's dressed as the gravedigger. Now, you can look at that and say, well, that could be anything. That may be just how they were dressed that day, and that absolutely could be the truth. But the fact is there were lots of clues. And here's another one on Magical Mystery Tour, which I'm just going to show. This is the cover of Magical Mystery Tour. And as you can see, there's 3 Beatles up here, and they're all in white. And then we've got this guy down here, and he's in black, and he's a walrus, which apparently in some cultures is meant to represent, which apparently represents death in some cultures. Now, I can't corroborate that. Then we've got this picture, which is inside the album, and you can see all of the other 3 Beatles have red carnations, and Paul McCartney has a black one. And that was meant to be another clue. Now, there's a whole bunch of clues. There were also clues in the songs. And there was a clue, for instance, in Strawberry Fields Forever, which I'm going to get back to that song because I think there are clues in that song, but not really about Paul's death. But there is a clue in that song where at the very end, you can hear John Lennon say, "I buried Paul." Now, according to the debunkers, he says, "I'm very bored." And really, if you listen to it with either one in your head, it sounds that way. But anyway, at the time, I really studied this when I was 10 years old. And the one thing I couldn't get my mind around, and the one thing that just led me to think that it was what the debunkers said it was, just a ploy to sell more albums. Because I was like, well, obviously Paul McCartney is still alive. You know, he's in the pictures, he's singing on the records. So, yeah. It never occurred to me at that time that they could just replace him with someone else. So fast forward to about 2017, 2018. And by that time I had been, down all sorts of rabbit holes, looking at all kinds of different conspiracy theories. And one day I was on YouTube and I found a video about how the real Paul McCartney was actually dead. And I was like, I'll have to watch that. And I did. And the evidence that they presented, and there was a great deal of evidence that they presented in this video, was actually very compelling. And I had to really laugh at my awakening process because I had thought, when I heard about, Pizzagate, Satanists, cannibalism, adrenochrome, all of that stuff, I was like, yeah, sounds about right. Yeah. The real Paul McCartney is dead. Ah! Oh my gosh, how can this be? But it really got me thinking. And I remembered this Colbert Report that I saw one time. I used to watch Stephen Colbert before I realized he was a complete shill. And he had Sir Paul McCartney on his show. And the thing that was really odd and didn't sit right with me at the time was, Stephen Colbert used to do this joke about, I'll give you the Colbert bump. I'll make you famous if you're on my show. So he was talking to Sir Paul McCartney and he was saying, now who are you again? What are you famous for? And I can give you the Colbert bump and I'll help you get more famous. And rather than laughing and saying, haha, as you would think someone would do on a show that's obviously a joke like that, Sir Paul McCartney got really irate and said, well, I'm Paul McCartney. He got really mad. And I was like, that's so odd. Why would he be insecure about that? So I started thinking about that, and I started thinking about all of this evidence. And I'm just going to tell you what the actual theory is. Supposedly, Paul McCartney, the real Paul McCartney, was killed in a car accident in November 1966, which is interesting because that was 59 years ago this month. And he was even reputedly decapitated. And there are lots of clues about this, again, in the albums. But the thing is, I looked again because I was like, okay, I'm going to go ahead and research this again. When Sam and I decided to do this show, I said, I'm going to go back and watch all those videos. Well, I got on YouTube again, and lo and behold, the only videos that would come up were debunking videos. Now, this is a huge red flag to me. If the videos came up and they were equally weighted, I would have thought, maybe it's true, maybe it's not true. But when they came up and they were all debunking this theory, I was like, yeah. I finally did find a channel, and I'm going to put it in the description, called Justice for James Paul McCartney. And I think, it's flying under the radar right now, hopefully still. But it's really interesting that suddenly I couldn't find any of those videos. And so anyway, basically the story goes that Paul McCartney was killed in 1966 in a car accident. And actually there are records that, reputedly records, obviously I haven't seen those records, but that his car was totaled, his Austin Healey was totaled on that day. However, according to the debunking videos, he wasn't actually driving the car. Somebody else was driving it. And, again, this is like, how are you going to prove this? I don't know. I don't know any of these people, right? I don't know them. And I don't know what happened. But I also think it's very odd that these debunking videos came out and said, somebody else is driving the car. That's what happened. I even saw one that said, well, actually, Paul McCartney was in a car with Mick Jagger at the time. And I was like, come on, you're pushing this a little too hard. So the other thing, most of the evidence that they said was that, why would anybody do this? This is silly. And it's just silly, which is not a real argument. This is silly is not a real argument. But they also said, how could we find someone who looks so much like him and was so much more talented, or is so talented, such a talented songwriter? How could two people look that much alike and be such talented songwriters? And I do want to say, I know people have different opinions about this, but honestly, I am sick of silly love songs. I've had way too much of silly love songs. I think it's a sucky song. I think that Paul McCartney's writing song ability went way downhill after he stopped partnering with John Lennon. But actually, beyond that, we don't even know if any of them wrote any of those songs. That's the other thing. I mean, how do we know? All we have is what the media has told us. These guys wrote these songs. It appears on the album, Lennon McCartney, Paul McCartney, whatever. So that's really a non-argument too, as far as I'm concerned. So I really started dipping into this. And one of the things that is now reputed to be a clue is something about what we call the butcher cover. And I'm going to bring this up, and I do think it's a clue. But I think it's a different kind of a clue than what they actually say. Because for one thing, the butcher cover did not come out. The butcher cover came out in June 1966. So that's reputedly before Paul McCartney was killed. So I'm going to bring up the butcher cover right now. And I want y'all to look at this. This was the original cover of Yesterday and Today. Now, it was almost immediately recalled. For obvious reasons, it was almost immediately recalled. But it's a collector's item now. And this album cover clearly shows the Beatles with a bunch of decapitated babies. Now, a lot of people said this was a clue to Paul's death, but actually, again, this album came out before Paul was reputedly killed. So what I wanted to say about that, though, is after diving down all of those rabbit holes, what is that album presenting to us? What is that picture presenting to us? Now, when I was a child researching the Beatles, I was like, why would they put that on their cover? That makes no sense, because it doesn't have anything to do with any of the music, right? And yet, here it is. We've got this cover, and it made no sense. I was like, this is horrible. Why would they do this? Well, if you've actually looked into a lot of the rabbit holes of the Satanism, how many people who are famous have had to torture and eat babies to become famous. And again, this is a rabbit hole. I've never been to a party like that. I don't actually know if this happens, but it does really resonate with me. It feels intuitively right. And this album cover, I'm going to show it one more time just because look at it. This is actually what famous people are reputed to have to do in order to, for instance, become big rock stars. So that really got me thinking about that. And I feel that this was disclosure. I feel that they were trying to tell us what was happening. And then let's take the song Yesterday, which appeared on this album and which was reputedly one of the last songs Paul McCartney wrote and recorded. And the words to Yesterday, yesterday, all my troubles seem so far away. Now it looks as if though they're here to stay. Suddenly, I'm not half the man I used to be. There's a shadow hanging over me. Now think about that. So the song is supposed to be a song about losing his love. And in a sense, I think it was, but not in the sense that we might think. That really seems to me to be a clue telling us what they were wanting to disclose. And I would say, and I have no actual proof of this. This is my intuition. This is me connecting the dots. I would say that this album cover may have been the reason that Paul McCartney died. Because I do think that the Beatles were there to really disclose some things. And I think they got into a situation where it was more than what they had planned. And so I really think that that was disclosure. And I want to jump then to Strawberry Fields Forever, that song, because I think there's another clue in there. Strawberry Fields was an orphanage in Liverpool. And if you listen to that song, he says, let me take you down because I'm going to Strawberry Fields. Nothing is real. This is something that Satanists say to justify this behavior. Nothing to get hung about. And then further on in the song, he says, living is easy with eyes closed, misunderstanding all you see. So again, I think there was disclosure here. And I would even go so far as to say this may be why John Lennon was shot years later. Because I feel like they wanted to bring forth this message to people. And, you know, that's my theory about what happened here. And I'm going to let Sam jump in here if you want to, Sam, just to kind of get your take on that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have any specific facts because I've heard of it before, and it was actually one of my, I'm going to say normally in the nicest way possible, one of my more regular, integrated, everyday friends. That's a huge Beatles fan that had kind of said, "Oh, you know, we were having a bit of a smate one night, and we were just chatting about the Beatles, as we often do." And he said, "Oh, have you heard about that? You know, conspiracy theory about, you know, John Lennon being unalived?" And I was like, no. So he mentioned about the fifth Beatle being the producer. But when you look on the actual license plate, there's something apparently on there that indicates something a bit not right as well. And he also mentioned something about when you play certain songs backwards, there's clues in that as well. And again, I can't remember the specifics of that because we'd had a bit of a smoke. But
that's okay.
As you do.
Well, I do know the specifics of that. So on the Abbey Road album, there's a license plate on the Volkswagen Bug that's in the background, and it says 28IF, 28 if. And that was supposedly a clue because Paul McCartney would have been 28 if he had lived. Now,
Okay.
you know, who knows? And the song, number 9, which we actually talked about, supposedly if you play that song backwards, it says, "Turn me on, dead man." And there's a bunch. I mean, there's a whole bunch of clues. And you can find them. I mean, you can find them anywhere. Just looking, Paul McCartney's death conspiracy theory, and they'll all come up. So really,
I mean, just to put you off there,
what this
one moment. So going back to the backwards music thing. So I did actually see something about that. And they did a scientific experiment, apparently. So a lot of the music, a lot of things that we do are subconsciously imprinted with these things that we've got in our subconscious mind. So there was a guy and he went and listened to lots of different songs. And nearly all of them had things in there when you played them backwards. And the theory is that your subconscious mind wants to be truthful, wants to put that information there. And that adds validity to that number 9 being played backwards. So, I mean, you look at like, I think is it the Stone Roses, they've got a couple as well, haven't they? That are a bit like Satan inspired and all that kind of stuff. And then obviously just quickly touching on the nature of the music industry. And there's been a lot that's come out recently in, recent years about some of the practices. I mean, even the more well-known ones, looking at kind of like Harvey Weinstein. Obviously the big one recently was with, what's he called? Bloody hell, his name escapes me. It was on Get Him to the Greek. What's it called, Kirsten? You what, sorry?
Brian Epstein? Brian Epstein?
No. So the music industry one, I forgot. Puff Daddy. He was the most recent prolific, we'll say, public figure that's apparently been abusing power. But this goes all the way to the top, apparently. So we can't again prove any of this, but there are things that have come out now that are going through the courts that it's not just conjecture. There's very real things that are going on. And this hasn't just started now. So what I would probably say regarding this, because again, I don't know a lot about it. But if it's happening now, it's, it hasn't just started overnight. This is endemic within all of the industries. It's like the music industrial complex or, the entertainment complex. All of those big powerhouses that sway public opinion. And it even links back to like the CIA and to other three-letter agencies and, the MK Ultra project, and even going back to LSD and how they used it in conjunction with kind of this underground movement of music, even into like rap music, to sway public opinion and to control the population in the way that we think. So that's another angle from it. So as we know, the Beatles were absolutely massive. My mum loved the Beatles. You loved the Beatles. Everybody knows who the Beatles are. Even years and years and years on, they're credited with being like one of the main musical influences on modern day music. And you look at the melodies and the way that constructs and the rest of it. They're influential. They've got fingers in many pies. And they were amazing artists. So they're in a position really where they can sway public opinion, for good or for bad. So we're not sitting here and, kind of deconstructing whether the Beatles were good or bad. We're looking at kind of why these things happen, and the reasons behind why this is going on. Because we want to kind of get to the bottom of why this is important, don't you, Kirsten?
I do, and I agree. And I think what we need to realize is that so much of what we're seeing is theater. Like they literally, and I believe this, and I'm not telling you should believe this. I think everyone should do their own research and figure things out for themselves. I'm not telling you what to believe. But I believe that the real Paul McCartney was killed in 1966. Whether that was actually a car accident that was an organic car accident or whether it was caused by someone wanting to do him in, I don't know. But I kind of feel like the Beatles really did want to tell the truth. Now, are they good or bad? I don't know. And I don't think it even matters. I mean, everyone has good or bad. And for one thing, I know that they brought me a lot of joy over the years, and a lot of other people a lot of joy. They had a lot of really good messages. Whether they were being controlled, which I think it's really at this point irrefutable that they were being controlled by people with an agenda. Because I think anybody who's a big star is, maybe not everyone, but I think most people who are really big and famous are under the control of people with an agenda. Now, whether those individual people actually are going along with that agenda because they want to, or because they're being forced to, or because they don't know it, that's a whole nother thing. And I don't think we can demonize everyone just because they're famous. And the other thing is, we don't even know if they're real people. I mean, a lot of them may be actors. This probably isn't the first time that this has happened, or the last time that this has happened. It may happen all the time. And it may be that they just hire actors and say, this is what we want, and this is what we're going to do, and here are the songs you're going to sing. Because I think all of these things are possible and probable and have actually probably happened. So I think it's just something that I really want to hit home, how fake this world is. Because this was presented to us as these guys just got together and they started this band, and then boom, they became famous, and all of these great things happened, and they were just doing their thing. These dudes, they're just doing their thing, and this is what happened. And I do not discount that they're talented, and maybe they did just start a band, and then someone said, oh, there you go. We want these guys. These are the guys we want to put up here. However it happened. The thing is that it's fake. It's really fake. And I think we really need to understand that, because the fact is that I know so many people who, celebrities are actually more real to these people than their real lives. I mean, I was literally talking to this woman one day, and she was talking to me about Taylor. And I thought she was talking about someone in her family, because she just kept saying Taylor. And I finally said, oh, well, when's Taylor going to come? When's Taylor going to see you? And she was like, and then she realized she was talking about Taylor Swift. And I was like, and I look at this and I'm like, we've actually made these icons, many people have made them more real in their lives than the actual people that are in their lives. And we look at them and say, oh, they have these wonderful lives. They're so much better than my life. My life is so boring. And actually, maybe they don't have wonderful lives. Maybe they're being mind controlled. Maybe they have to do rituals where they eat babies. All sorts of things may be happening here. And we don't know. We don't know. And so thinking that someone who's a celebrity, or thinking that how things really are from seeing it in the media, is, I think, really dangerous. I think it's a really dangerous thing. And I think it's something that I see all over the place. And so I just kind of wanted to shed light on that. And like I said, there are a whole lot of clues about Paul McCartney being dead. And you can actually find, and I'm going to put that YouTube in the description. So if you want to look into it yourself and see what people say and see what they're talking about, please do. Because I think that it is important, and I went back and forth with this for a long time, because I was like, is it really to talk about Paul McCartney or anybody? This isn't really my thing. It's not my thing. I don't really want to talk to people, but I think it is important just to recognize that so much of the time we're having the wool pulled over our eyes, and we're being shown things that are not actually true. I mean, they have a green screen in any TV studio. They can say whatever they want. And if we can't experience it in our own lives, we don't know if it's true.
Yeah. I think that's the big
Yeah.
takeaway, isn't it? It's knowing the difference between what's fact and what's fiction, and what's fake and what's real, to a degree, because obviously we can argue that down to its minutiae, but it's being present in our own lives, isn't it, and not giving away our power, because it's another test of sovereignty when you're presented with these, like you said, illustrious and famous and luxurious celebrities who apparently have got everything that they want. And I mean, we've talked about this before, but essentially what we kind of lust after is this material ideal of perfection. And it becomes another box to bind you. And what we're actually chasing when we're chasing money or anything like this, it's freedom. And I think the point that you were making really well is, what have you got to give up to get these material things, and how happy is it actually going to make you? Because it's external, isn't it? You're seeking external validation for your own happiness. And we all know that, you know, especially anybody on this kind of path of real deep self-worth, it's about going inside and being happy with who you are. And when you start to cultivate that inner peace and that inner kind of self-worth, you realise that actually you don't really want to be famous. Because it becomes a book. And it's the projections of other people. You've got millions of people projecting their ideas on you, you know, and you look at people, they rise to fame, and then once you're put on that pedestal, because that's what it is, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's a whisker's width away from falling. So what were you going to say, Kirsten?
I was just going to say, I think we need to be able to separate the people from the art, because it's okay. It's okay to listen to the Beatles. It's okay to listen to anybody you want to listen to. It's okay. Listen to the music you want to listen to. Admire the people you want to admire. But also know that this may not be what you think it is. And it's a fantasy. I mean, when you look at a person up on a screen, it's you projecting a fantasy. It's not that real person. It's someone who's an image. It's just an image. And it's okay. It's okay to like images. It's okay to love the music. It's okay to do whatever you want to do. But do recognize that this is not your real life. It's something that is a distraction, perhaps, or something that gives you joy. And I think everyone should do the things that give them joy. And if you want to go home and put on Magical Mystery Tour and listen to it, lie on the floor like I used to do and let it wash over you, go for it. You know, you don't have to feel bad because, well, maybe they did things that weren't very good in order to get there. Because I do think that they did have a message, and I do think that they were sent, and maybe they were hijacked. But I do think also that they did want to tell the truth.
Have you got anything else to say on that? Oh, is that just very quiet? All right. Normally, yeah, I was like, there's more. Yeah.
They're probably,
We've run out now. Yeah, no, I agree. It is the whole. I mean, trying to bring it back, looking at the whole point of this, it's just to kind of dissect what's been going on. And I know, Kirsten, that you said you've had some interesting spiritual interactions with the ghost or the spirit presence of Paul McCartney, which is very interesting, isn't it, on a different level. And you really felt, I mean, we've talked about this for a little while, you've really felt quite compelled to make this episode and to really dig into this, because I think it's almost like we're reopening and starting another chapter of this and trying to share the message. And the thing that really captivated me when we spoken before about it was that you felt like there was this real moral thread, and that, you know, it was really tied into kind of exposing some of the underbelly of the music industry. And I know a lot of again, there's a lot of people that are doing videos and stuff on this now, so it's not new news, but I think it's looking at where it all started and the reason for that, and the satanic inversions that are kind of being used to manipulate and control the population. And the things that, you know, if you're asked to sell your soul, essentially, for material trappings, the soul is eternal and the material is not. So I think that's the moral framework, really, that we should consider if we're going to take anything away from this. It's looking, you know, how does it transpose into our own everyday lives? And it's looking at the things that we're giving up, really, for an idea of happiness when we're actually bypassing what's really important.
Yes, I agree. And I did feel, you know, and I hate to say things like this, but I guess the people who watch our videos are not going to be freaked out by this. But as you said, when I first started thinking about this and talking to Sam about doing a show about it, I really did feel Paul McCartney come into my field. I really felt him, and I felt that he wanted us to tell the story, because there may have been a feeling there that this was all in vain. Because I think, you know, I think that when they took him out, or when he died, or whatever happened, there was something deeply lost there. I really feel like he had a message that he wanted to bring, and that got cut short. And I mean, obviously they didn't want him to bring that message. And obviously, like, if you look at the Butcher cover in terms of 1966, that wasn't on anybody's radar at the time. You know, if that came out now, lots of people would recognize what that was. But at the time, that was not even a thing. So they were kind of the forerunners of disclosure, in a sense. And I do think there was something nefarious going on against them. So, but as Sam was saying, really, it's just about taking back our sovereignty and not putting these people up on a pedestal and saying, these people are better than me, and I need to look up to these people. Because the truth is, we each have our lives to live, and maybe we're not living in a really posh, ritzy place, and maybe, you know, people don't swoon and faint when we go out in public. But that doesn't mean that we don't have important and purposeful lives.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, Sam, do you have anything else you want to say?
No, because this was your baby. I was just along for the ride for this bit. Obviously, I put my 10 cents in because that's what I do. Yeah. But no, not really. I think I've kind of been. I've donated all the coverage that I can at this point, because I just don't know enough about it. Yeah, but it was very informative. And it's a good place, I think, for people to go away. You know, I would just say, don't take our words for it. I mean, it's not my word, really, because I don't know anything about it. But don't take, you know, the word of anybody, really, for it. Go out, do some digging. Kirsten did say she'd put that link in the description box if you want to go and look at those videos. And just start to question what's going on. Open your eyes. And it's a really good starting point, I would say, if it's something that interests you, to go and dig deeper.
Yes, very much so. So thank you so much for joining us, everyone. And thank you, Sam, for humoring me on my little
it's a passion project. We've all got them. Yeah, I've got some on DMT coming up. Yes. So just, yeah, buckle your seatbelts.
Yes. Yes, buckle your seatbelts, because we're going to dive into that too. And yeah, we love you. We love all of you very much. And we're grateful that you tuned in today. And yeah, so bye everyone.
Yeah. Catch you on the flip side.